Welcome back. Now, an article by Dina Kraft of the New York Times, published Tuesday, September 28th, titled, "Israel Stops Jewish Activists from Entering Gaza." Israeli Navy commandos peacefully commandeered a catamaran sailed by an international group of Jewish activists on Tuesday, trying to break Israel's blockade on Gaza. The 10 activists from Israel, the United States, Britain, and Germany, among them an Israeli 82-year-old Holocaust survivor, responded defiantly to the Israeli Navy when it hailed to them from a frigate, demanding they identify themselves and give their destination. "We are going to Gaza," the group responded from the deck of the 30-foot catamaran, Irene, festooned with peace flags and carrying humanitarian aid, according to a Twitter update posted on its website. The Israeli military said in a statement that the vessel was boarded without incident and that no violence of any kind was used by neither the passengers on board nor the Israel naval forces. The military nicknamed the boat the Provocation Yacht. The boat's voyage from Cyprus was another attempt to thwart the blockade after an Israeli assault on a Turkish Gaza-bound aid boat on May 31st, in which Israeli commando forces opened fire, killing 9 Turkish Islamic activists on board and setting off an international dispute. Israel maintains its forces operated in self-defense after they said they came under attack by a group of passengers. Last week, a United Nations Human Rights Council investigation concluded that Israel violated international law in the raid. Israel dismissed the report as biased. The Jewish activists, whose cell phones were confiscated when the boat was seized, according to an Israel-based spokesman for the group, were being taken by the Navy to the southern port of Ashdod. A well-known Israeli passenger was Rami Elhanan, a peace activist whose daughter was killed by a Palestinian suicide bomber. The one American on board was Lillian Rosengarten, 75, a practicing psychotherapist from Cold Spring, New York, who fled the Nazis as a child in Frankfurt. "I was very reluctant to see her go, out of my own anxiety, but I find myself increasingly impressed with her bravery," her daughter Lydia Rosengarten, 46, said in a telephone interview from Cold Spring. Jonathan Shapira, 38, a former Air Force pilot, was part of the crew. Mr. Shapira is now an activist with Combatants for Peace, an Israeli-Palestinian peace group, along with his brother Itamar, 30. Their mother, Tzviva Shapira, 68, waiting for them at the Ashdod port, said in a telephone interview she was relieved the army had not used force. "That was my fear," Ms. Shapira said. "Jonathan and Itamar are against any violence. Itamar was a combat soldier, and now he is opposed to wars." The group's goal had been to try to reach Gaza and unload aid cargo, in what the group said in a statement was a non-violent, symbolic act of solidarity and protest, and a call for the siege to be lifted to enable free passage of goods and people to and from the Gaza Strip. In the wake of the massive condemnation that followed May's deadly flotilla raid, Israel partly eased its land blockade on Gaza, which it imposed 3 years ago after the militant Hamas seized power of the sandy coastal strip. Its naval blockade, however, remains in place, Israeli officials say, in an attempt to prevent the smuggling of weapons. The IDF regrets that it must divert the Israel Navy's attention from its regular operational activity defending Israel and its citizens because of acts of provocation such as this, the Army's statement said of Tuesday's episode at sea. And that was an article titled, "Israel Stops Jewish Activists from Entering Gaza." The article was written by Dina Kraft of the New York Times, and it was published Tuesday, September 28th. And from the Tuesday, September 28th edition of the London Guardian, an article written by Ian Black titled, "Iran Imprisons Blogfather for Anti-State Activities." The Iranian blogger Hossein Derkashan, a beacon for those fighting for freedom of expression in the Islamic nation, was sentenced to 19 years in prison today for alleged anti-state activities. Derkashan, 35, widely known as the Blogfather, or by his online name Hodder, was arrested in late 2008 after returning to Iran following a period living in Britain and Canada, where he also has citizenship. He has been a contributor to the Guardian's Comment is Free website. A judicial source said he has been convicted of cooperation with hostile countries, spreading propaganda against the establishment, promoting counter-revolutionary groups, insulting Islamic thought and religious figures, and managing obscene websites. Recent reports said prosecutors in a Tehran revolutionary court, where his trial began in June, had requested that he be given the death penalty. Iran has a huge number of bloggers who continue to write despite the crackdown on opposition voices following last year's disputed presidential election. Derkashan helped pro-democracy activists develop their use of the web, particularly blogging and podcasting technologies in Farsi, to promote their cause. The Iranian authorities made him apologize for his dissenting views when he left the country in 2000 and censored his blog from 2004 onwards. News of his sentence was confirmed by an unnamed relative to the International Campaign for Human Rights in Iran, the ICHRC. Neither the family nor the lawyer knew about the sentence, the relative was quoted as saying. They read the news online. Mashreknews.ir, the conservative website that reported the sentence, referred to him as a counter-revolutionary blogger. It said he was also ordered to repay funds to the value of £28,400. Darakhshan can appeal against the sentence. The ICHRC said it considers Darakhshan a prisoner of conscience, prosecuted and sentenced solely for his opinions and writings, and called for his acquittal and release by the appeals court. It said that there are more than 500 prisoners of conscience in Iranian jails. In 2006, Darakhshan made a highly publicized visit to Israel, Iran's arch-enemy, and told an interviewer that he wanted to prevent an Israeli attack on his native country and wanted Iranians to understand that Israelis are not evil. The Iranian authorities have meanwhile shut down 2 pro-reform newspapers, Andashe No Daily and Bahar Zanjan, for publishing articles in which they had insulted officials, another paper, Sharag, reported today. They were the latest of several newspapers banned since the election. And that was an article titled, Iran Imprisons Blog Father for Anti-State Activities. It comes from the Tuesday, September 28th edition of the London Guardian and was written by Ian Black. And finally today, an article titled, Germany to Settle Last World War I Debt. This article was published Tuesday, September 28th by the Toronto Star, and it was written by Michelle Martin of Reuters News Agency. Germany will finally pay off the last of its debts from World War I this Sunday on the 20th anniversary of German reunification. Germany's Federal Office for Central Services and Unresolved Property Issues, the BADV, said on Tuesday a bond issued to pay remaining debts stemming from the conflict would mature on October 3rd, 2 decades after West and East Germany united. The final €70 million or $94 million installment will close a 92-year chapter that saw Germany plunge into totalitarian dictatorship and trigger a Second World War that ended with its division during 4 decades of Cold War. The Treaty of Versailles, a peace settlement signed by Germany and the Allies in 1919, made Germany solely responsible for World War I, requiring it to pay reparations for the damage done to the Allied countries and peoples between 1914 and 1918. The sum was eventually fixed in 1921 at some £6.6 billion, a vast sum for the time, which many historians argue was beyond Germany's ability to pay. Efforts were made to reduce the strain, notably with the Dawes Plan in 1924 and the Young Plan in 1929, during which Berlin was granted loans to meet its reparation payments. But the heavy burden nevertheless unleashed massive resentment in Germany and helped to fuel the rise of Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party. Germany stopped paying the reparations under the Nazis, and the Western Allies, Britain, France, and the United States, reached a new agreement on Germany's foreign debts in 1953. The London Agreement stipulated that some debts were not to be paid off until Germany reunified, the BADV said. And that article was titled, Germany to Settle Last World War I Debt. It was published Tuesday, September 28th by the Toronto Star, and it was written by Michelle Martin of the Reuters News Agency. You've been listening to Headline News for Wednesday, September 29th, 2010. I'm Nick Logan. Stay with us for the National Report, up next on VoicePrint, Canada's broadcast reading service. Thanks for listening.